Hello again everybody, it's me, Madam Macabre, and I'm not sure this video will be super long today because it is actually my birthday and I'm gonna go meet up with some friends in a little while, but I love you guys and wanted to get a video in before I left. So fortunately for you guys, you get another story time. Now, this story time, I wish I could come up with something birthday related. It would be kind of fun to have something on theme, but I ain't really got anything that comes to mind right now. But I do have something unrelated to birthdays that comes to mind that leads to a really funny story. So, just the other night, I was actually having a discussion with some friends about the huge difference either having a really good or really bad teacher can make on your entire schooling experience, and I've had some of both. But what comes to mind right now is a really good teacher that had some really good stories related to it. Now this teacher I'm talking about did the near impossible. He got 8th grade me to actually be excited for algebra class. Yeah. Good old Mr. Caruzes, he was truly meant to teach. He knew how the minds of kids worked. See, he understood the whole concept with kids and only having a set amount of attention span before we just mentally check out and can't absorb anymore. He understood this and he worked with it. See, we'd be going to class for about 20 minutes or so, you know, that's the mark where you've absorbed all you can at that point in life and you just you space out and you stop paying attention. It's math. It can be boring for a lot of kids. And he would spot this, he'd spot us starting to nod off, and that's when he would do something that would either make us howl in laughter or recoil in horror. And then once calm returned to the class, he would jump right back into the lesson with our attention spans renewed. He was a very strange man, and I say that with the best intentions, not the bad kind of strange. He had very unconventional methods that worked. And as sad as it makes me to say, if he were still teaching nowadays, he probably would have been fired for some of these methods because somebody would have been offended. Fortunately, a few years after I graduated, he retired, so I imagine he's off now messing with all the neighborhood kids, living a happy retired life. But during the time he was still teaching and I was in his class, he left us with many great stories and legends to tell about the school. One of the first things that comes back to my mind that just showcases how unique this man was his pointer stick. Now back in the day, I'm not sure if they still use this in schools, but they had these pointer sticks that teachers would use to point out certain things on the boards and kind of direct the lesson along. And if you got a really ornery one, they'd use it to slap your desk if you're falling asleep. But he didn't just have a normal pointer stick. No, that wasn't creative enough for him. You see, I don't know where he found it, but he managed to find a plastic hand, shaped like a pointing hand, that he fixed to the stick. So he had this pointer stick with a pointing hand at the end of it that he would use for his lessons and pointing at people. It was grand. Well, where this would come into play for this story, back when there were these overhead projector things. Kids who are in school right now probably haven't seen one of these. I'm sure they phased them out by now. They were these big projector things that had rolls of plastic that you could draw on with dry erase markers, and they'd write on it, and then it would project the lesson onto the board. Well, he had all the math problems and things that he was teaching on this plastic projection sheet that was up on the wall, and he would look out around the classroom and notice that we were starting to nod off on this particular day. And he had prepared a lovely treat for us to snap us back to attention. He spotted that we were starting to nod off, so he just stops talking mid-sentence. He leans over to the projector and starts winding it. And away goes the math problems, and we start to see something else move into focus. Up on the wall in projected glory, where the numbers had recently been, was a huge, hyper-realistic drawn nose. With lots of nose hair, of course. And we were just totally confused. Why is there a giant nose projected on the wall? What's up with that? Well, to our awe and horror, we soon found out what he had in store. See, he had this old record player that he kept in the classroom. He promptly walked over to it, started one of the records, and it was the old Jaws soundtrack. So we got the nose, and then the old Jaws doo-doo, doo-doo. Then suddenly, coming into focus, as a shadowy silhouette above the projector, was his lovely pointer hand that he then proceeded to use to pick the nose of the giant nose on the wall. And with 8th graders, you can imagine that was a hit. But that's just one of the mild tales of old Mr. Carousas. See, he had more interesting methods than just that. For instance, he didn't personally agree with the school's demerit system. He thought there were better ways to dole out punishments for students who disrupted the class. This is probably one of the sole things that would have gotten him fired nowadays. See, he had this lovely thing called the Cabinet of Shame that was in the back corner of the classroom. It was a cabinet that he kept closed at all times, except for when a student had misbehaved and it was time for them to receive punishment. See, part of what made it work was the mystery behind it. None of us had any idea what was going to be in that cabinet. So the student would walk back to the corner of the classroom escorted by Mr. Carousas. Now he told them that they could either take their demerit and go to the office like every other high school teacher would make them, or he could pick one of the cardboard boxes that was hiding within the cabinet, and their punishment would instead be to open the box and look at what was inside of it. Well, no one ever knew what was inside all of the boxes, but one time I got to see what was inside of it. Not because I was being the troublemaker, because I was the classic goody-two-shoes student that always did her work and didn't really get in trouble. But one time my seating arrangement had me sitting back near the cabinet, and oh, good old Sarah King, she was always getting in trouble in that class. Well, one of the days she got in trouble and opted, as all students did, to take the shame cabinet over the demerit. So she walked over, and I couldn't help but peek over my shoulder when she was receiving her punishment. With shaky hands, she slowly opened the cardboard flaps and screamed when she saw what was inside. It was really quite surreal. See, what was inside that box was a poorly taxidermied muskrat. I don't know where he got it, and I don't know what else was in the other boxes. But it was pretty funny. She screamed, the whole classroom laughed, we got it out of our system, and we were able to move on with the lesson. It always seemed that every day there was one unfortunate soul who got sentenced to the shame cabinet. Now, we weren't allowed to talk about what was in the shame cabinet while we were in the class, but you know we talked in between classes, and I heard of some interesting things. A two-headed teddy bear, a weird painting of a frog, many things, the list goes on. But not even the shame cabinet is where the stories end with wonderful Mr. Carousas. See, you never knew what you were going to get when you walked into that classroom. I remember one day walking in and being very confused at the ceiling I saw before me. See, we were out in one of those old portable classrooms with the ceilings of that foamy stuff that push upwards. Well, I walked in that day, and the entire ceiling of that portable was full of a huge grid of paper clips stuck in a very mathematical straight lines, with a strange pulley system of string and other gadgets winding its way all the way through the paper clips. And of course they led all the way back to Mr. Carousas' desk. I had no idea what it was. Nobody did. We were all in awe, but he told us, pay no mind to the grid, sit down, and we're going to start our lesson. Which you may be thinking, how can you just pay no mind to something like that? But remember, this is a man with a muskrat in a box. We were used to stranger things, so we just paid no mind. So he proceeded with the lesson, and we did actually start to forget about it because he made no mention of it and it didn't pop up. And we were about half an hour into the class at this point and nothing had happened. Finally, we got to that point in class where he just had us start working on our work quietly and told us not to have too loud of conversations to disrupt other class members. And of course, good old Sarah King again started talking really loud with her friend, and it started to distract other students and make them not work on their work. And that was the point at which I kind of peered over to Mr. Carousas' desk. He knew exactly what was going on, and he was eyeballing her. But that wasn't all. He was over there, hunched over, working away like a crazed puppet master at a bundle of string. That's when I remembered the grid. I looked up and was amazed to see the strings starting to move around and the pulleys activating, and suddenly, from his desk, an old gym sock began to rise and move up to the ceiling, and it slowly began to move across the grid as he steered it with his string contraption, and slowly, inch by inch, it began to move closer and closer to Sarah until it stopped right above her head. And it was at that moment that quite a few other students had noticed what he was doing. Sarah was so deep into her conversation that she didn't stop and she didn't pay it any mind. But something was definitely up. Slowly, he began to lower the sock. It got closer and closer to her head, and other people in the classroom who noticed by that point what was going on started to giggle. And he'd reel it back up, and she'd look, and she wouldn't see anything. And she'd go back to her conversation, and he'd slowly start to lower it again. And the class would laugh, repeat, looking up, there's nothing there. She starts getting mad because she doesn't understand what everyone's laughing about. Goes back to her conversation. Finally, he just lets it drop. And the old gym sock falls on her head, and she jumps out of her desk and just shrieks, and it was a great show. Then he reels it back in and gets it back to his desk, while pointing out at her, "Let that be a warning to the rest of you. The sock of Mr. Caruzis is ready to drop on the heads of anyone who isn't constantly vigilant." Good days, good days. And I've got so many more stories, but I don't actually have time to share many more of them. But I will end on a good note. It was actually our finals, one of the last stories I have. See, weeks leading up to the finals, he had us terrified, talking about how much of a big deal it was, what a huge portion of our grade it was, and how we really needed to crack down and focus. He told us that it was such a big deal that we were going to have a prep test before the actual test, and to treat the prep test like a real test if we wanted to have any hope of passing the real test. So we got the prep test, we were stressing out over it, working our best, trying not to drown in fear. Well, finally, the next day comes around, the dreaded final day. We come in, and there's one of those TV stands in the classroom. Okay, why is there a TV in there? Well, we all get in our seats, and he sits down and looks us dead in the eye and says, "The day has finally come for your final. We've got some very serious, very important subject matter to test you on. That's right. Today, you will be tested on Ben-Hur." What? No joke. He literally popped in to the VCR player on that TV an old copy of the movie Ben-Hur and handed out packets of questions about the movie and told us to fill it out as we watched it. So yeah, our 8th grade algebra final was on Ben-Hur. I'm pretty sure he actually used the prep test as the real test, and he just wanted an excuse to have a day where we could laugh and joke and watch a movie instead of be freaked out over tests like every other class period, which it was good. It was a very nice break in that otherwise extremely stressful day. His methods may seem extremely unconventional, but they actually worked quite a bit. I got solid A's in algebra all through that year, and I'm pretty sure many of my classmates did as well. It was a lot easier for us to learn when we weren't so stressed out of our minds. He understood us, and he worked with us in the ways that we needed to have a successful learning environment. I can't help but think if there were more teachers like him, there wouldn't be so many kids who hate school. So wherever you are now, Mr. Caruzis, I hope you're happy and having as many fun antics as always. Okay, well that's all the time I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any fun stories about teachers you had or experiences, either good or bad, crazy stories you want to share, let me know in the comments below. But that's, once again, all I have time for, so I will catch you guys later. That's all for now. Bye-bye!